Somewhere in America right now, a student is sitting in a classroom being taught what history means. Not just what happened, not just the facts, not just the names, the dates, the places, the footage, the witnesses, the arguments, the documents, or the aftermath. No, they are being taught what they are expected to think about. They are being taught which version is respectable, which version is unacceptable, which questions are allowed, which doubts are suspicious, which conclusions are already settled before the conversation even starts. And that is where a free people need to stop and pay attention. Because in a constitutional republic, history is not supposed to be owned by politicians. Truth is not supposed to be managed by government. And education is not supposed to become a delivery system for state-approved memory. Because once power starts deciding not only what happened, but what you're permitted to believe about what happened, then history stops being history. It becomes narrative enforcement. It becomes ideological management. It becomes a political weapon aimed straight at the minds of the next generation. And once that starts, it never stays limited to one riot, one election, one classroom, or one party. It spreads. It always spreads. So before we talk about Democrats, Trump, the media, January 6th, or what is happening in Virginia and what could happen next in, say, my state of North Carolina, let's ask the real question underneath all of it. Who gets to write the history and the story of America? And who gets to benefit when the people are told that asking questions is somehow dangerous? So today we're going to ask, are Democrats rewriting history while claiming to protect democracy? We'll be right back. Remember, we fight for what's right because it's time to go right.
Come gather near, come take your seat. We've got the truth, not polished cheat. No sugar spin, no managed views. Welcome to real news. No spoonful full of fake belief. No dressed up lies to hide the grief. Just facts, big questions, honest views. Welcome to Real News. Welcome to Go Right with Peter Boykin at GoRightNews.com, where free minds still ask questions.
Today we ask the question, are Democrats rewriting history while claiming to protect democracy? Welcome back to GoRightNews.com, and this is Go Right with Peter Boykin. I'm Peter Boykin, your constitutionalist for liberty, and this is Go Right with Peter Boykin. In case you missed it, something bigger than a normal political argument is unfolding in this country. This is not just another food fight between left and right. This is not just another media cycle full of dramatic language and selective outrage. This is about narrative power. This is about who controls the public memory of major events. And this is about whether the American people still have the right to challenge official political storytelling without being treated like heretics against the state religion of modern media consensus. Because once government, media, and activist institutions start working together to decide what history must mean, then the issue is no longer just education. The issue is about control. Folks, we talk about 1984, but here it is happening right now. this year. The morning coffee had barely cooled when the headlines started rolling in again. Another political clash, another warning about our so-called democracy. Another lecture from the same people who always seem very eager to tell Americans which facts matter, which facts do not, which violence counts, and which violence gets exhausted or excused, and which narratives must be protected at all costs. And that the very thing that people are starting to notice is the fight in America is not just over our policy anymore. It is over our memory. It is over our language. It is over who gets to define the past so they can control the future. In a constitutional republic, history should be studied honestly, debated openly, and tested against evidence. It should not be locked behind a partisan velvet rope where only approved interpretations are allowed to pass the bouncer. But we're seeing more and more is a political culture that does not just want to argue its version of events. It wants to formalize it, institutionalize it, teach it, enforce it, and punish dissent from it. And that is where people need to stop pretending this is normal. Because it's not. So did the media get it backwards about Trump while ignoring chaos on the left? Well, let's step back and look at a broader picture. For years, Americans were told that Donald Trump was the singular threat to the country. Not one threat among many, not a polarizing force in a deeply divided nation. No, the threat, the existential one, the boogeyman in a red tie with orange hair. Well, not orange hair, orange face, right? The blonde hair, red tie, orange face, right? The boogeyman. The warnings were relentless. Trump would destroy institutions. Trump would ignite unstoppable political violence. Trump would dismantle democracy. Trump would end the American experiment. You heard it on the cable news. You read it in editorials. You saw it repeated in speeches, on college campuses, across social media. And though every institutional megaphone, through them all, the political class could get its hands on, you heard it. The public was bombarded so often that many Americans just absorbed it as osmosis. It became accepted language. It became cultural shorthand. Trump was not simply wrong, reckless, abrasive, or controversial. He was framed as a unique civilizational danger. And folks, with the algorithm out there, as much as I'm pro Donald Trump, I get so much negative. It comes through my news and my phone about Donald Trump. But reality, as it often does, refused to cooperate with the script. Because while the country was being endlessly warned about the threat supposedly posed by Donald Trump and his supporters, something else was happening in plain sight. Cities burned. Police officers were attacked. Federal buildings were targeted. Businesses were looted. Cars were torched. Streets were overrun. Monuments were vandalized or pulled down. And old 80s icons on their left leg were saying, I wish the White House would burn down with Donald Trump in it during the, Pussy Hat riots. And in far too many cases, the public was told not to focus too much on that part. Nope. That is where the media narrative started to look a little less like journalism and a little more like stagecraft. Because if one side's unrest becomes a more national morality tale and the other side's unrest becomes a contextualized inconvenience, then people are not being informed. They're being managed. And that takes us to a prediction that never quite matched reality. Now let's be fair and serious at the same time. Trump's presidency was not calm. It was not quiet. It still isn't. It was not free from chaos, controversy, ego, missteps, or constant conflict. And no reasonable person would claim that. But the apocalypse people were promised never quite arrived in the neat little package that the media kept selling. The country has not become a fascist wasteland. The Constitution is still sitting on Constitution Avenue, and it did not evaporate. And the courts, they haven't disappeared. The elections, they haven't stopped. And Congress didn't vanish in a puff of procedural smoke. Instead, what America got was what it often gets in modern politics: high conflict, endless institutional warfare, fierce policy battles, constant media escalation, partisan trench warfare, public distrust, and a nation increasingly divided not only by what happened, but by what each side insisted the country was required to believe about what happened. And that last part matters, because there's a major difference between reporting facts and manufacturing mythology. And somewhere along that way, much of the political press stopped being content to simply report on Donald Trump. It wanted to define the meaning, or his meaning, in total, final moral terms. It wanted the full dramatic package: the villain, the threat, the warning sign, the lesson. That's not an honest analysis. That is scripted storytelling that's wearing, it's trying to wear a press badge. And so that leads us to the violence that got framed differently. Now let's deal with the obvious point before the usual outrage machine starts foaming at the mouth. Political violence is wrong, period. And that does include January 6th. That includes the riots in the streets. That includes attacks on police. That includes attacks on federal policy and property. That includes vandalism, looting, intimidation, arson, and mobs of any political flavor. The Constitution does not care whether a brick came from the right hand or the left hand. A mob is a mob. But what America noticed over the last several years was not equal moral clarity. What they noticed was selective framing. January 6th became, for many in the media and government, the permanent symbol of the right. It was evoked again and again and again, as though it was alone summarized the entire movement, the entire voter base, and an entire political worldview. Meanwhile, repeated violence tied to left-wing unrest was often described in softer terms: abstract language, sanitized text, or context, or underplayed coverage. The public was told to understand it, contextualize it, and avoid those broad conclusions. And Antifa doesn't exist. They're not even an organization. And the Proud Boys are horrible. Antifa, no, them. We don't know who they are. So one event became sacred narrative material. The others became awkward clutter in the storyline. It's not a small distinction. That is the distinction. Because the way events are framed determines how they are remembered. The way they are remembered determines how they are taught. And the way they are taught determines how future generations understand legitimacy, protest, dissent, authority, and truth itself. And that is why this matters so much. We are not just arguing over what happened. We are arguing over what Americans will be allowed to remember. So when the government decides the, quote, right version of history, and now the story gets even more serious, because this fight has moved beyond headlines and into law. In Virginia, the General Assembly approved the legislation recently designed to prevent schools from teaching what lawmakers call falsehoods about the January 6th Capitol riot. And the language is a revealing part. The bill says instruction must not portray January 6th as a peaceful protest. It must not suggest that widespread election fraud could have changed the result of the 2020 election. Instead, the event must be described as an unprecedented, violent attack on the United States democratic institutions. We're going to pause there, Some people hear that and instantly say, well, good. That sounds like fact protection. That is, yeah, but that's how narrative control always introduces itself. It always shows up wearing a shirt that says propaganda department. It shows up pretending to protect the truth. But here's the constitutional concern. Our lawmakers moved beyond teaching facts and began requiring an official, state-approved interpretation, and government is no longer just encouraging education. Government is establishing doctrine. Supporters say they are stopping misinformation. Critics say they are crossing a line into political narrative enforcement. And in a constitutional republic, that line matters a lot because facts should be teachable, evidence should be examinable, arguments should be challengeable, a lot of bulls here, and interpretations should be debatable. The minute politicians start telling schools what historical conclusion must be attached to an event, education starts to slide towards state-managed memory. That should make every American uneasy. Whether you love Donald Trump or hate Donald Trump or wish he would vanish into a gold-plated cloud and stop yelling for 5 minutes, get over it, people. And you got to understand, this control over our mindset and no debate, it's dangerous. The real danger is precedent. And here's the part too many people miss. This isn't only about Democrats. It's about precedent. Because once one party claims the authority to define the official classroom interpretation of a politically explosive event, the mechanism is now on the table for everyone. Today it's January 6th. Tomorrow it could be 2020 riots or 2028 or whatever. After that, it could be election disputes, border crisis, presidential impeachments, surveillance abuses, COVID-era restrictions, or any other event that powerful people want packaged in a particular ideological wrapper. That is the danger. Not just the current use of power, it's the normalization of it. The founders did not design this system because they trusted power. They designed it because they did not. They understood that concentrated authority has a nasty habit of expanding, rationalizing itself, and calling critics dangerous for noticing. That's why the First Amendment matters. That is why free speech matters. That is why open inquiry matters. Because truth is not supposed to need political bodyguards. Truth should be able to stand in the open, take questions, and survive scrutiny. And only propaganda panics when people start comparing notes. I mean, they're sitting there talking about, oh, they're destroying our democracy. Oh, they're destroying our democracy. But yet, they're trying to write rules to kill our free speech, indoctrinate our children. That's the true indoctrination. History is not just facts. It is who holds the pen. Every nation wrestles with its own story. That part is unavailable. But there is a difference between arguing about history and monopolizing it. History is not just a pile of facts stacked in chronological order like dusty boxes in an archive room. History is interpretation. History is emphasis. History is framing. History is what gets highlighted, what gets minimalized, and what gets condemned, what gets excused, and what gets repeated until it hardens into accepted civic folklore. And that is why people fight over monuments, over textbooks, commemorations, curricular, public memory, and national language, and podcasts. Because whoever controls the framing of the past gets enormous leverage over the moral philosophy and physiology of the future. And that is exactly why government should never become the final author of official historical meaning. Not because every interpretation is equally true, not because facts do not matter, but because free societies require open contests over meaning. I mean, that was all supposed to be the free exchange of ideas. That's what school's supposed to be about. The people must be allowed to question. The people must be allowed to compare. The people must be allowed to notice double standards without being smeared as enemies of democracy. The state that cannot tolerate questions about its preferred story is not protecting the truth. It is only protecting power. So that leads to a national shift to local shift. And why should people in North Carolina care? Because we talk about North Carolina here. Remember, you can go visit gorightnc.com for more North Carolina news. Now let's bring this home, because too many people hear a story like this and think it is just some strange fight happening in another state. I mean, this is right across the border if you're North Carolina. This is Virginia. It just had a Republican governor, just had Republican infrastructure, and overnight, boom, this. That's lazy thinking, folks. North Carolina is isolated from national trends. It's not. No, it's not. It's not isolated from national trends. It's being reshaped by them. Population growth, migration, changing demographics, institutional capture battles, political realignment, media influence, school fights, local board fights, state-level power struggles. Everything that starts with a "that could never happen here" argument has a funny way of eventually showing up where a committee hearing, a talking point memo, and a smiling press release. North Carolina is already in the middle of major political transformation. That means the people sent to Raleigh matter more than ever. And the question is not simply whether candidates have an R beside their name. The real question is whether they actually understand constitutional limits. Will they defend open debate? Will they reject narrative policing? Will they protect free speech when it becomes uncomfortable, not just when it is convenient? Will they encourage education that teaches students how to think instead of telling them what to think? Will they represent all citizens properly, or will just the loudest faction trying to dominate the culture war from one direction or the other? Because if North Carolina sends weak-minded caretakers of political convenience instead of serious defenders of liberty, then the same kind of narrative control measures we see elsewhere can absolutely make their way here. And once they do, they will not be sold as censorship. They will be sold as responsibility. And that is how this game works. We'll be right back with more of this podcast after this spoonful of misinformation.
Now gather round, be good, sit still. We know exactly what to fill your little heads with every day, so truth won't wander off astray. When the news is feeling messy and the facts are hard to chew, there's a tidy little sermon they can spoon feed right to you. With a grin and proper posture and a polished TV clown, they can make a whopping falsehood feel like wisdom handed down. Just hush your doubts and do not fuss. The experts know what's best for us. A spoonful of misinformation makes the fake news go right down in the most delightful way. Do not think for yourself, dear. The state will tell you what is true, and every smiling institution will decide your point If the past should prove inconvenient, or the storyline seems thin, they will trim a little detail so the lesson fits the spin. With a textbook and a headline and a moral neatly dressed, every naughty contradiction can be tucked away with the rest. So mind your place and know your role. They'll keep confusion from your soul. A spoonful of misinformation makes the fake news go right down in the most way. Do not think for yourself, dear. The state will tell you what to see, and every bright authority will shape your memory. Who writes the tale can rule the land with gentle voice and steady hand. A little fear, a little praise, and truth gets lost in civic haze. So clap along, do not resist. They'll say dissent does not exist, but free minds have a funny knack. They keep on asking, looking back. Smile politely, nod precisely, never wander off too widely. Read the chapter, skip the doubt. That is what good schools are about. Color in the approved belief, trim away the stubborn grief. If you question what they've shown, they may say you stand alone. A spoonful of misinformation makes the fake news go right down. With a patriotic flourish and a bureaucratic crown. Do not think for yourself, dear. The state will mandate what you believe, but the truth has strange persistence, and it does not take its leave. So sing along with all the rest, pretend the script is simply best, yet somewhere past the prim facade, a free thought marches on. By
So step back and look at the whole strange machine. For years, the public was told that Trump was in danger, or Trump was danger, or the danger, the singular one, the destabilizing force, the man who would supposedly drag the country into authoritarian darkness. And yet, while the public was staring at the giant media-crafted monster in the center of the stage, something else kept moving around in the shadows. Institutions, political gatekeepers, narrative managers, cultural enforcers, people who increasingly seem to believe that democracy means the public is free to speak only after approved authorities have finished explaining what reality is. And that is not liberty. That is a lecture hall version of soft authoritarianism. And yes, it should alarm you. So is America watching a narrative war disguised as history? Come on, folks, let's stop pretending that this is just about education. It's not. It's about power. It's about memory. It's about whether the ruling class and media, politics, and institutional culture gets to decide which parts of history become shared doctrine and which parts get filed away in a national junk jar. A junk drawer. For years, Americans were told that Trump was a threat to democracy. That phrase got repeated so often, it's even in this podcast, over and over again. So often, it became political wallpaper. People stopped hearing it as a claim and started hearing it as a fact simply because the repetition has a way of dressing propaganda up like common sense. But the deeper danger may not be one man. And it isn't. The deeper danger is a system full of people who think they should control how the rest of us interpret political reality. That's the real sickness, folks. A political culture that cannot defend its version of events through open debate starts looking for other tools. School systems, media narratives, government resolutions, institutional pressure, social punishment, selective outrage, emotional blackmail disguised as civic virtue. Look, squirrel. And always the same sales pitch. This is for your protection. This is for democracy. This is to stop misinformation. This is to preserve norms. This is to save the country from dangerous people asking dangerous questions. No, no, no. A constitutional republic does not survive by teaching people to fear questions. It survives by training them to ask better ones. The founders did not build this country on blind obedience to official narratives. They built it on skepticism of centralized power. They built it on the idea that free citizens must be able to challenge authority, examine evidence, and argue openly without the state hovering overhead like some nervous substitute teacher with a censorship complex. The minute government starts setting the boundaries of acceptable historical interpretation, the debate stops being about facts. It becomes about permission. And free people should never need permission to stop and think. That is why this matters, even if you despise Donald Trump. That is why this matters, even if you think January 6th was shameful. That is why this matters, even if you believe some people are flat out wrong. Because once government gets comfortable defining what interpretation is mandatory, it will not stop at one event. Power never stays. Power never says. Power does stay. Power never stays. We have enough now, thanks. Sorry, we have enough now. I'm full. No, power doesn't say that. Power says this tool worked nicely. Let's use it again. And that is the road to something ugly. Not always with boots and sirens, sometimes with polished press releases, sometimes with expert panels, sometimes with curriculum language, sometimes with the calm voice of the bureaucrat explaining why free inquiry has become a threat to social stability. That is still control. And in North Carolina and all the other states, they need to understand that right now because the future of this state depends on whether voters send people to Raleigh or their state capitals who still believe in liberty more than narrative management. We need leaders who defend free speech for real. We need leaders who trust citizens to think. We need leaders who understand that the government's job is not to become the ghostwriter of American memory, or America's memory. And we need citizens who are willing to notice the double standard when they see it. We need many, 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 many people out there. Because here's the harder truth. When politicians say they're protecting democracy by narrowing debate, they're usually protecting themselves. When media figures say they're defending truth by refusing scrutiny, they are usually defending a storyline. And when institutions say history must be taught only one acceptable way, they're not teaching confidence in facts. They're reveling and revealing fear. Fear that the people might compare narratives. Fear that the people might ask what is ignored. Fear that people might notice that history is being edited in real time while everyone is being told it is just civic responsibility. And that is why you should not look away. That is why you should not shrug this off as another temporary cultural war squabble. This is bigger than that. This is about whether Americans remain citizens capable of independent thought or become passive consumers of state-approved memory kits with the batteries already included. Because once politicians become the authors and authors of history, they will eventually try to become the editors of dissent. And once they become the editors of dissent, liberty is living on borrowed time. That is the line, and the constitutional republic should never cross it. Folks, this is Peter Boykin with Go Right News with Peter Boykin at gorightnews.com. If you're tired of being told what to think instead of being given the facts and trusted to think for yourself, then you are in the right place. I need you to go to gorightnews.com, follow us. Find us on Rumble, YouTube, Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, X, Facebook, Truth Social, TikTok, Gab, and a whole lot of other places that even I forget. And across the platforms where free voices are still willing to challenge the script. You can support this independent journalism and independent commentary at Cash App at the $ Go Right News. Links are on the website. Because the more the political class tries to manage what you remember, the more important it becomes to defend the right to question what they are selling. You know, when the government starts telling you which version of history is the only acceptable one, it is not trying to educate you. It's trying to train you. And free people were never meant to be housebroken. Time to go right, folks. God bless.
Yeah. Turn it up now. Standing on a hill again. Welcome to Go Right. We're doing this tonight. Everyone convinced they win. Voices loud like thunder rolls. Nobody listening to souls. Flags raised high like battle cries. Truth gets lost between the sides. Woke up to headlines spinning in circles again. Everybody shouting loud, but nobody listening. Welcome to Go Right. We're doing this tonight. Everyone convinced they win. Voices loud like thunder rolls. Nobody listen into souls. Flags raised high like battle cries. Truth gets lost between the sides. Woke up to headlines spinning in circles again. Everybody shouting loud, but nobody listening. Left side shouting, they're the cure. Right side certain, they're the pure. Every headline fuels the flame. Different jerseys, same old game. Scrolling through chaos, trying to find what's real. Facts get twisted like a carnival wheel. Algorithms draw the lines, turning neighbors into signs. We build walls with every word, call each other absurd, but the ground beneath our feet is cracking where we stand and speak. They say slow down, don't speak too loud, blend into the background crowd. Everybody ready to die on this hill, digging trenches deeper still, but I was never built that way. Got something real to say. If we fall, who takes the lead? If no one stops to see the bleed, you wanna die on this hill tonight, holding tight to being right. I just might go right tonight. Turn up the truth and shine the light. No fear, no filter, no disguise. Standing strong for freedom's rise. But the real path we never see is walking down together free. Not left, not right, alone and blind. But forward with a different mind. Yeah, we the people take the mic. Yeah, we go right tonight. Echo chambers made of steel. Every truth could disappear. We forget the common ground. We're chasing who's allowed. From the straits to the stakes to the federal halls. Every level hearing liberty's calls. They're trying to frame it like a left or right game, but freedom burning is a universal flame. Not about hate, not about control, just a constitution in the heart and soul. We got lost in who is away from me versus you. No more waiting on permission. No more silence in submission. Lay the armor on the ground. Hear the quiet, hopeful sound from small towns to the skyline view. Every voice can carry through. Not surrender, not defeat, but choosing where our futures meet. The strongest stand we ever make is choosing unity for freedom's sake. Hey, hey. Clap your hands, feel the rhythm now. Stand tall, let your spirit out. Go right, feel the movement grow. Let the whole world know. Step down from the hill tonight. Not losing, just seeing the light. Go right together, not apart. That's where real freedom starts. Let's die on the hill where hate ends. Here where courage means we face the fear. I just might go right tonight. Turn up the truth and shine the light. Where truth is built with open hands, not broken by divided lands. From the local streets to the national fight, we the people unite tonight. Go right together down the way, beyond the fight, beyond the fray. Yeah, I just might go right tonight. Freedom burning strong and bright. The path is clear when we decide to walk the road side by side. Raise your voice and hold it tight. Yeah, we go right tonight. Yeah, standing on a hill again. Yeah. But this time we choose the light. Go right together down the road. Yeah, we go right tonight.